Checking in with the young quarterbacks of the NFL 5 weeks into the season. That and more this week on the Footballguys Dynasty Show. And Jordan, we've got some second-year players that we are now going on a year and a half of data points. And we got Kenny Pickett, who has now started a little bit in the NFL. And your Buffalo Bills weren't too kind to him in terms of ingratiating him into the friendly confines of NFL defenses.
At least he's got an unnecessary roughness on his resume. That's always a good start to quarterback play. So I have a question for you. Your 22 starts in your NFL career, and you in 2 games, and 2 of those 22 starts have averaged over 8 yards per attempt. How's your career going?
Well, I hear a lot of NFL shows that say as long as you're 7 yards per attempt, you're okay. So I think that's a little too low of a baseline personally, because you could still have some job security issues. Are you going to go? Is this the Trevor Lawrence? Is this the Trevor
Lawrence deal?
Okay.
This is a Trevor Lawrence
You
deal.
continue to say he is tremendously overvalued and overrated. You've been fervent in that.
I believe that.
Consistent. I will say
we haven't seen growth. We really haven't seen him get better.
Well, we've seen a little bit, yes.
A little bit.
It's hard not. I will say it's hard not to, based on last year.
Well, I mean, here's what I would say. Like, I ran some numbers, and do you want to guess who's number 1 in the NFL in expected points per dropback?
Geno Smith.
Trevor Lawrence. You want to guess who's not performing anywhere near that number? Trevor Lawrence. You look at this, and it's still the turnover numbers. His turnover-worthy play rate's actually up from last year. His big-time throw rate is slightly up, but still he's in the negative in that term. He's still below 7 yards per attempt. He's not living up to expectations. They're putting him in a great place to succeed, and he had 2 good games. Everyone overreacted, made him a top 10 quarterback in Dynasty or in the NFL. I heard that multiple places after week 3, and now we have sort of righted our ship back to exactly where we were to start this season. And I leave this thinking, like, we do this, right? And the lesson that I think we should take from the Trevor Lawrence experience is don't believe it until you've seen it for at least a season to an elite level, or 2 seasons to a very good level. And if you're betting high amount of currency on that, before that, you're begging to be let down. And I mean, it's a very easy one. This has told us this over and over. And I come back to this, like, we're gonna look at this 2021. We could do a full dissection of the 2021 draft class, and we're gonna come back to this and be shockingly let down by what we thought was going to be an elite class, right? In terms of the quarterbacks in particular. And I keep coming back to this, and there was like no chance that none of these guys were going to miss. And Chicago doesn't trust Fields. We haven't seen Trey Lance really play in 3 years, and Trevor Lawrence is not the generational prospect that we were promised. This is a disappointment. I don't think there's any way to say that this is a disappointment.
Well, I think the other part is we know the market in general pushes up the young quarterbacks, right? We've got to have our build around dynasty superflex 2 quarterback player, got to have them young. And the problem is we haven't got the infusion. Like, you get 5 drafted in the first 15 picks of a class, and going into year 2, you're going to boost those players up. The expectation is they're going to bridge the gap with the older players. We're seeing guys that obviously now the new erosion age, if you don't put up a strong season, is mid-30s, because we're seeing Matthew Stafford, Russell Wilson get little leeway. We've already seen Aaron Rodgers drop in price, Tom Brady's month to month or year to year, or again, I mean, his price is never coming back. And I mean, you just see all this drop off. And so who goes there? I actually started thinking about it when this was going to be our topic this week. And I mean, who are, you get past a few guys, and it's not like Joe Burrow's having a great year. Like, who are you putting, in, beyond the top 4, 5, 6, because we've got Dak Prescott, who's been out. And everyone is kind of holding on to that week 1 game that was not pretty. Well, let's let him play a little bit. Let's let him actually get back. And it may be a few games in, for sure. Deshaun Watson, this is largely a red shirt. I mean, these are some key names in that top 8, top 10 that, we got to see it. And, if you don't trust Kyler Murray, Jalen Hurts is getting pushed way up. So, you've got to either be all on board with him or you're going to be all out because he's in the top 5 or 6. So it's just really interesting that we have so many young quarterbacks. And like you said, what if the answer is almost none of the above? What if we get to 2025 and the answer is almost none of the above? And we look back at how many times each of these players was in the top 10 to 15 of the position.
Yeah, it's funny. Like we played this game and we had this, it was a bit for a while, but it was did you pay enough, right? Did you get enough for Patrick Mahomes? Right? Did you get enough for the absolute elite quarterback? And the answer to the question was almost always no. And I think this is a good example when you look at just the difference, just the seismic difference between the level of security that you and it's guys that we like, honestly. Like it's guys like Stafford, Russell Wilson, guys that we really like, that are way up there, that sort of meet all our criteria, all our benchmarks, and just they're off to a slow start. And just look at the seismic difference between Mahomes and those guys, right? So like there's almost no gap. There's almost no cost that isn't worth paying to get one of those guys because they just change your world, right? They just change your world. I have a Mahomes and Allen team. Like you can't get, it's really tough to get around. Like it is really, you better bring your A++ game and score 230 because like it's going to be a problem when those guys are playing. So, I mean, I think that just the more and more we do this, right? Taking any insecurity or any uncertainty at the quarterback position and just keep going up and just keep going up. It's worth the cost that you pay. It always is, and it always will be. And I think that this is a good lesson to learn from this year.
Well, they talk about the upside, well, if I take a shot on a young quarterback and I get it right, I mean, look what I gain. But I don't think a lot of people think about what they lost because,
Right.
we're now partway through and a decent amount through year 2. Justin Fields is so far below my threshold for job security risk that it's like you'd be surprised. And so if they're not doing well independently, and then you say, well, their team has a bad record, they have a high first. I mean, that's a torpedo combination because, I mean, how do they say no? They might also have a coaching change who didn't draft you in the top, in the top half of first round. So now you're getting a clean slate start, and they're like, I don't want this guy. He got the other guy fired.
Right.
I don't want that guy. I want my guy in a class that is projected to have some good prospects there and worthy of going in the early part of the first round. And so we're not seeing progress. Again, less data points here, but from Zach Wilson, we've seen a little bit of uptick, as you mentioned, from Trevor Lawrence. I'm a little higher on him, just in terms of like, is he going to work out a year or two from now? Mac Jones, certainly not. And Davis Mills, nope, no progress. Trey Lance, we're still working off of college tape in terms of like trying to build a sample size. I mean, it is really tough. And you're talking about 6 notables from last year's class. And Kenny Pickett yet to throw a touchdown, and he has one of the highest interception rates I've ever seen in very early time. So, I mean, that's what we're working with. And this is still a class that people were drafting in the first round. Malik Willis,
right?
Someone who didn't even have the pedigree to warrant being in that discussion of that rookie draft zone, or Desmond Ridder. I mean, that if they hit from deep like that, I mean, that's a Steph Curry half court shot without Steph Curry shooting it. I mean, that's you're going to be lucky. That's a Dak Prescott type outcome if you hit from there. So
you spent 101 in a rookie draft on Trevor Lawrence when you could have had Geno Smith for free, right? I mean, how's the irony of that? It's just, I mean, you look at these and I mean, I think as we sort of try and solve, as we sort of learn more and more about the quarterback position, and it's not a solve, right? It's we'll never solve it, but I think we learn more and more of things to look at. I think a good example is taking a lot of bets at really cheap costs, right? It's been a lesson with Mariota, right?
Well, it's the retread. It's the retread prices, right? And that's why I'm in on Gardner Minshew, because we've seen him play well and frankly way better than a lot of these guys,
right?
Especially when they're dirt cheap. Right? Yeah. So can you get him for a throw-in? Can you get him when somebody during a bye week, and this is the perfect week to mention it, for the next 2 months, buys are going on? Do you think in a 28-man Superflex league, you're going to get a look at a lot of backup quarterbacks if the starter is currently healthy? Heck yeah, you are. Mm-hmm. Because you don't have a lot of excess guys to cut at other positions. But if you had Gardner Minshew, I mean, that's a tough hold. When you've got, let's say you got an injury, you've got a starting lineup spot to fill. And frankly, if you come in there and you have a bigger trade and you ask for a guy like that, I mean, that's not going to halt any deal.
Right.
So, yeah, I mean, looking at profiles. And so let me ask you this, though. So,
Mhm.
the uncomfortable nature of going towards the guys that have never done it, are you more comfortable with the Stafford Wilson profile of this year is not going well and, banking on the bounce back of somebody in a 32 to 35-year-old range?
I'm going to bank on the bounce back. I, like we know what Russell Wilson is, right? And I was just thinking about this today. Like you start a new job, right? You go to a new job and all of a sudden like you're a month in and you still don't have the access to all the key cards, right? You still can't figure out how to, you still have a supervisor sort of constantly overlooking your work. Like this is where we are in the
Well,
Russell Wilson at
it's one
Denver
of the
aspect.
toughest jobs in America by
Right,
also.
right,
So
right.
you've got that, and you move
And
away from all your familiar weapons. Tyler
correct.
Lockett's not there.
Correct. And your supervisor's new, by the way. Right.
Yeah.
So just think about that. Like
He
he
what he's
doesn't
doing,
know
right?
how to like between the two of you can't turn the lights on. And I
And you
think
were
there's
with
a
the
little
same
bit of that going
coach
on.
the whole time.
Correct.
Over in like the friendly confines.
Correct.
More and more, this whole new system part of a quarterback is important. And unfortunately, it has to kind of work right away or be established when you are plopped into it. Otherwise, it's going to be a change it. So you almost have to get this perfect storm of that combination working, which is tough for it to actually stabilize. Otherwise, it is going to keep changing because it's either quarterback's the problem, system, coach, whatever is the problem. So something's going to change. It's not, they rarely do they just roll everything back. We're going to do this one again.
Yeah.
I do think, though, Denver's at least winning enough games and they're at least viable enough that I still hold they could find their way, over the next month or two.
Right.
The interesting part, though, is, I mean, again, we see this a lot of times with these mid-30s quarterbacks. The Ben Roethlisbergers, the Phillip Rivers, the Matt Ryans, the Eli Mannings. They have this downturn for like 1 year. They might throw a ton of picks. They might have a really low touchdown rate. It's just so abnormal. And we're seeing that with Stafford. We're seeing that with Wilson. And I think when you get into 37, 38, this could be the end. I think for Matt Ryan, it is the end. Like I'm seeing a lot of signs that it's him.
Ain't good.
Yeah, it's him. It's painful to watch.
Right.
And so, I mean, he's like Carson Wentz that he can't move, and it's creating a lot of bad plays that he's not used to. It's just like he's getting into those bad plays himself by holding the ball and maybe just not seeing things. But he's in a new system too. Talk about a new environment where everything is different and it's just not as good. The other thing I discounted and I really didn't focus on as much as a possibility here. What if Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf are far superior to Cortland Sutton and Jerry Jeudy? What if, a lot of people view the weapons as, oh, it's so deep and so good. Well, Hamler hasn't played. Patrick got hurt early. Albert O has been a non-factor. I mean, and then Jerry
Eric
Jeudy,
Saubert,
right? And Eric and Jerry Jeudy hasn't taken a step forward.
Right.
So you've got Cortland Sutton, who's nice, but I would say no one would compare him to DK Metcalf and how he sort of influences the defense. Look at what Tyler Lockett's doing in Seattle. He's doing the same thing he did with Russell Wilson. So maybe that was part of it.
Yeah.
So I think I underplayed the potential outcome of what if Denver's weapons are worse, and notably so, in addition to anything else going on. But I think the bounce back factor, it's really interesting because we're talking about older quarterbacks and they potentially might be dynasty buys for teams not really looking at this year as much.
Yeah.
More of a focus. It's so odd to say that.
Right.
But I mean, they're falling to what, QB 18, 20 prices? I mean, they could be had, and you don't even have to give up a first rounder as part of the package potentially.
You have to do it. Right.
Right.
And just the difference between, if you're looking at two quarterbacks, just keep in mind that the difference between when you're comparing a quarterback that has a hit on his resume or that has multiple hits, so that's the Stafford Wilson sort of group that we're talking about, and you compare them to guys at the same cost, right, at the same ADP that don't have that on their resume, that have no hit or have maybe even one, right? The difference between those is enormous over the next 3 to 5 years. Okay. And it's not a difference in value. Like the younger person doesn't fare better in value. They actually fare worse. Like there's a whole, like there's a ton of things that go into the reason that these younger guys are overvalued compared to the older guys, but the older guys crush them in terms of at the same cost, guys that have done it before crush guys that haven't done it before. So just when you're thinking about this, when you're thinking about putting together Kenny Pickett plus for Russell Wilson, Kenny Pickett plus for Matthew Stafford, you're changing the arc of your team pretty substantially from the quarterback position. So you sort of have to
can't
keep that in
believe
mind.
how high Pickett is valued right now.
It's crazy.
For just the mystique of hasn't played.
Correct.
He hasn't screwed it up yet.
Right. And honestly, probably gets a pass because what a situation to get thrown into, right? I mean, you got to go up to Orchard. Like there's blood in the water. And he took a couple of hell shots. Like I didn't see the first one until after I saw where he got the personal foul. I get why he got the personal foul. Like I understand that now. Yeah, I mean, and I think that there's some leniency. And honestly, like that, if you look at that team, like that's a decent set of weapons. Like for a place to go to as a young quarterback, Pittsburgh ranks pretty high because it's a good franchise and it's right. They've got weapons everywhere, right? And they've got, they've got a tight end, they've got wide receivers, they've got running backs. So there's a lot there that to build off with him. And I see the optimism, right? The one thing I would say about Stafford too, like, all right, so they're not great this year. They didn't get what they want from Allen Robinson. You think this team's going to just sit pat, right? Is that like, of all the things we've learned about the NFL in the past like 5 years, it's that the Rams are always in the market to make a change and make a move, right? They're always the team that's in on depressed value, right? When I heard that DJ Moore was potentially available, instantly I thought of like, hey, there's a wide receiver too for the Rams.
The Rams will easily give up a mid-round pick or two.
100%, right? That's instantly where my mind went to when I heard that they were sellers. So I think a month from now could be very different. And honestly, if you're going to make a bet, just bet on Sean McVay. Like bet on Sean McVay to figure out offense. We'll figure that out. And I'm not worried about Stafford long term at all.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest keys is, I didn't think Van Jefferson was important, but he's a viable wide receiver in there. You saw Tutu Atwell get deep. They've had no deep presence. Allen Robinson, we thought, was going to provide that. He's provided none. And I think when you have checkdowns to Higbee and then Cooper Kupp just go win, when that's your whole offense, I think it makes it difficult, for Stafford, because again, if you don't stretch the field, you don't challenge, and everything is short. And Cooper Kupp is great, and Higbee can catch 5 yards and turn it into 7 over and over again. But at some point, you need more to truly be balanced and truly threaten all three levels. And so that's part where Van Jefferson being back, maybe Tutu Atwell provides a little bit, here and there, but they need something. And like you said, they're not a team that's going to rest on their laurels if it costs a non-first round pick, or heck, maybe even if it costs a first round pick, to keep supplementing what they have and get it right. And you know what? Who knows? We might get down the line and late in the season, Odell Beckham's back there as not even a trade player, just someone that they end up signing back. I had one final question here for the young quarterbacks. So of the quote unquote unproven guys, who do you like in terms of what you've seen, trajectory they're on? They have not checked the requisite boxes, but maybe a combination of, hey, at least they're not egregiously expensive, but yet you've seen enough positives to say, let's just hit the pause button. We'll reassess as we go. But I wouldn't be surprised if they get on that list.
From an NFL perspective, I don't think he's going to succeed from a fantasy perspective, but Davis Mills fascinates me. So, but let's set him. That's a whole nother podcast. Zach Wilson, right? Zach Wilson averaging over 8 yards an attempt. You look at some of the grading stuff, a little turnover worthy-ish early on. However, has some big time throws, has some good grades in terms of some of the other services that are out there grading quarterbacks. And honestly, like you look at this system, right? We've seen quarterbacks have good success, and it's a very forgiving system in the Shanahan tree. They're still battling through offensive line. I'm surprised that you haven't gotten a call to play left tackle for the Jets at this point. It's getting to be that preposterous in terms of how many injuries that they've suffered, but you have redundancy across the board in terms of their weapons, right? At receiver, at tight end, even though they're not great, but there's multiple different options there to fill in. They got 2 really good running backs. Like you have a lot of stuff there to support him. And I don't think you necessarily need to be an elite performer I don't think you need to be an elite quarterback to be an elite performer in that system. And I think that we're starting to see the beginning of that a little bit with Zach Wilson with some of his numbers. Again, it's 2 starts in. Be careful. Like, he's not Joe Namath yet. But I'm encouraged by what I've seen so far from him.
They're the 2 priciest guys, but I'm more open today than I was during the offseason about Jalen Hurts keeping the job. Can he do enough? I still have a long way to go. I think he's really being controlled by the system. I don't know if they're going to want to do that going forward. We've seen some erosion. AJ Brown started out, with gangbusters in week 1 and, hasn't quite been back there in terms of dominating. Now they're kind of reverting some of these weeks to the run game, keeping it close to the vest. So I think that's something really to monitor, regardless of if they're winning games. Ask yourself, how are they winning games? Because if it's very close to the vest, and that's going to be something that may or may not affect them in the playoffs and get them ousted. But if that is the way they go through this and they don't advance very far, then that's going to be one that they kind of already told us how we should feel, which is why I think he's risky. Now, that said, some of the things I look at, he's doing well enough to say that he should, with asterisks everywhere, should have job security. But we know kind of optically we shouldn't feel that safe with him. So that's one. And I'm a little more optimistic on the progress we've seen. Now, obviously, he's going to have probably more of a window, Trevor Lawrence is, than Justin Fields and some of these other quarterbacks that might be gone this offseason. Like, that would shock me if Jacksonville went back to the well with a notable quarterback, even in the first couple of rounds. So he's going to get next year, which I think is going to give him now 2 chances to elevate his game and continue to show progress. Now, he was starting from such a low point. He's got a long way to go. Now, I just haven't seen progress. Mac Jones has probably been the surprising one in terms of, I thought there was a high floor there. Like, it's probably how you would speak about Davis Mills. Of just like, NFL-wise, I think there's some stuff here. Fantasy-wise, different conversation. But Mac Jones is one where, I thought he was going to be high floor and, maybe not, many touchdowns, but avoid the turnovers, and he is turning the ball over. So that's a must-have when you have a limited skill set or a limited physical upside. That's going to be something that I think bears watching because, again, Mac Jones falls in that bucket of he's young. Let's put him reasonably high in Dynasty when you're not getting a ceiling. And then if he doesn't really have a lot more job security than these other names we're mentioning, then where are we going with this? Because he's supposed to be high floor and quote-unquote safer.
Yeah, let me just pitch this to you for 1 second. You have a top 5 pick, right? Each of these teams, let's just assume they have a top 5 pick, and they can pick the second quarterback on their board. Okay, so they don't get the number 1, but they get the number 2 quarterback on the board in the top 5 of this upcoming draft.
All of them.
Who isn't taking him? Right? Are the Jets taking him over Wilson?
Based on what I have now, again, I'm the aggressive type where I say,
Correct.
If I'm not ironclad sure, I don't do this whole like, oh no, it's going to hurt somebody's feelings. And the whole point is to get
That's
it right.
where you live.
Yeah. The whole point is to get it right. And so if 2 top picks give you the chance to get it right, and either one of them, you get the rookie deal and that window, so be it. I'm a happy camper. And if you bail on the second player, I'm trying to think of what was that team that ended up, it was Josh Rosen, right? They bailed on him for what, a third? Does that sound right? Second or something? So I know that's hemorrhaging value. They basically moved on, but they still got something back of value.
Right.
They didn't just dump him. So, if the Jets get quarterback right, let's say, or the other guy wins the battle, you can get a second for Zach Wilson. And again, the important part is the result at the end, which is you have the quarterback that you feel you can build around.
If you have
a top pick, I said this about Washington. If you have a top pick and you pass on quarterback, like that could set you back to where you have to trade up the next time if you want a quarterback.
Yeah.
It could cost you an extra first round pick.
Cost you a job like it did in Carolina.
Yeah.
Do you think the only
to me, Jacksonville's the only one.
Okay.
Based on what I currently feel, Jacksonville is the only one that should pass on quarterback.
What about Philly?
well, here's the interesting part. Hurts is coming up on contract. So, I mean, is this year 3?
This is year 3.
Yeah. So this is the off season that you pay him. Typically. I don't know. See, I would do the thing where now you have rookie contract control over somebody, and then you can franchise Hurts, and you're probably for a couple years, you're probably right around the number. of some of these other quarterback depth charts. Again, I would do that. I mean, I would, because they are built to win. And if they get ousted in the playoffs and they're kind of rolling the same thing and they have some questions and it's just not gonna, he's like Lamar Jackson minus, or however they view him in the grand structure, and then they pass on a quarterback. Well, they wouldn't have a high first. So anyway. A little bit different of a conversation.
They might.
That's right.
The Saints pick might be early.
That's right.
There's a chance that'll be early. I don't think that's going to happen. I think the Saints are better than that. But right now that pick is 9. So I doubt they've got quarterback 2 there. But yeah, it's I think an interesting thing. By the way, best PFF grade on non-play action throws this year, Jalen Hurts, which was surprising when I looked it up.
I mean, do you get the argument for him being like QB5 or so in Dynasty, right?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. Because it's the ultimate. Is Jalen Hurts worth it when you got to pay him $40 million? That's the question you have to ask yourself. Because, we had this conversation last week about the guys wearing capes, right? Like the guys that can go out there and just wreck a week, right? That can just carry a team. If you're paying a quarterback $2 million or $3 million, whatever his salary is this year, it's less than 5. I think it's like 2 or 3. That's you have a whole lot of options, right? You've got AJ Brown, you've got Dallas Goedert, you've got a good offensive line, you've got all sorts of you got an embarrassment of riches. When you have to add a 0 to it and then double it and pay him $40 million, that is a substantially different set of weapons that you have. And so
you're gonna lose stuff.
Yeah, you have to do it on your own. And again, we've seen that, right? We've seen that with Josh Allen. Josh Allen is not throwing to multiple free agents anymore. Josh Allen is throwing to day 3 guys who are developed off their own team, right? So
Diggs and a bunch of other players,
and Diggs and a bunch of other guys, right? Because that's all you can afford, right? And
if Goddard goes away and they don't bring back Devonta Smith, is that the sacrifice?
Right.
So you got AJ Brown, and then they're drafting guys to hopefully replace others.
Right. I think their response to that would be, we're just going to keep drafting guys, right? If they sign Hurts, I think the option is you just keep drafting wide receivers, right? I mean, with how expensive they are, you just have to keep taking them. And I think the Bills have done that. I mean, Pittsburgh's done that for a decade, right? You just keep taking them because you're hoping to have some cost control.
Hopefully don't pay the $25-30 million wide receiver money.
Correct.
Avoid
do what
that.
Pittsburgh did with Juju, right? Like, all right, we're not sure. We're not gonna pay it forever, and let him walk, right? I mean,
that was Claypool, right?
Right. They're gonna probably do that with Claypool, right? Like, and they're just gonna keep taking guys, and I think that's the
right next play. 3 years is cheap. Yeah,
right.
Chad Parsons, Jordan McNamara, episode 123, the Football Guys Dynasty Show. Want to remind you to subscribe to footballguys.com. That is where we live on our content on a weekly basis. You got Jordan doing waiver wire stuff. I got a new reality article looking at various dynasty topics, dynasty trading, and another one. Tons. We've already got staffers that are looking at the 2023 class. They've got a big board going every week. I'll shout out I forgot the exact author for that, but regularly scheduled dynasty ranking updates, as well as even college roundtables. So a ton of added content. You're not going to want to miss out on that. And you want to give us credit as well. So go over there to footballguys.com/dynasty winners.
Yeah. Hey, I wrote 1,000 words for the roundtable this week. I threw the notebook at it. So
I read the whole thing. I got an alert that you submitted yours, and I was like, I got to read this. What's funny is I didn't get the questions. I just read your answers.
Yeah.
Even just the answers were very nice.
Yeah. So it was good. Fun. Hold on.
It's time for the Stash of the Week, powered by Sleeper.
Stash of the Week time, powered by Sleeper. And that means it's time to start looking on the perimeter of player value, something that can help us. And Jordan, how often do I talk up a wide receiver? Almost never, right?
Not a whole lot, Chad.
This might be the first wide receiver ever mentioned this season for the Sleeper Stash of the Week.
Yes.
But I've got one. I think it actually qualifies because running back, not a great week. I actually smirked when I saw people recommending Kenneth Walker as a pickup, even in redraft. Even in redraft, apparently he was out there a decent amount. But at wide receiver, we've got bye week starting. We've got players that are out. You've got, again, this is going to be a very slippery slope the next 2 months and basically the rest of your fantasy regular season now includes buys. And you may need to supplement. We recommend going lean at mean at wide receiver. All that's to say, how about a wide receiver that's available who's actually done something in the NFL? He was an early producer for his day 3 pedigree, fell behind the wayside. They signed some guys, they drafted some guys. None of those have really worked out on the Giants. How about Mr. Darius Slayton? He is out there quite a bit. 53% air percentage this past week. He didn't even play full snaps, 25% targets. This passing game is wide open. And again, Wan'Dale Robinson has barely played. Kadarius Toney, who knows? He's like the NBA players. He's being load managed. I mean, who knows when he's going to play? They've got an open canvas for someone to come in. And Slayton produced. He was an early producer that he's had a little bit of injury. And now they've had 3 guys either signed or drafted over the top of him that haven't worked out. They're circling back to Slayton now.
Yeah, I dig it. And like everyone's hurt. Like this has been 2 straight years of everyone being hurt there. Like it's crazy. Like the arc of guys that have played like more than 3 or 4 games in a row for them has been very small over the last 2 years. It's been pretty wild. So yeah, I like Slayton. And like, how about them being a surprise this year? Just a completely different team. I'm not sure they're great. They're probably overperforming what they actually are. But an interesting story nonetheless. All 3 New York teams are good this year, so it's fun to see. By the way, 3 AFC East teams in the playoffs, 1st, 5th, and 6th seeds projected at present. So chew on that, AFC West.
Take that. We got some dynasty trades to discuss here. So bigger deal involving AJ Brown. We got AJ Brown, Joe Mixon, and Michael Carter for Tyreek Hill, J.K. Dobbins, and Zamir White.
Is this really come down to what you're feeling about AJ Brown versus Tyreek Hill?
Like, I thought it earmarked on Dobbins. I thought Dobbins was the keeper.
Interesting. Yeah. I mean, I think Tyreek Hill is probably better than AJ Brown. Dobbins and Mixon feel very similar to me in terms of I don't feel great about them. I think Mixon's probably got a higher range of outcomes, but he's older and I have some concerns there. I think Michael Carter's a better player than Zamir White is, right? So it feels pretty neutralish unless you have a really strong take at the running back spot or the wide receiver spot. Was sort of my initial reaction to this.
Yeah, I think the years are important. I think it's 25 versus 28 at the wide receivers. Mm-hmm. So how does this look in 12 to 24 months? Where yes, Dobbins would remain, compared to Mixon probably in terms of insulation, but Brown would remain instead of Tyreek Hill. From that perspective. So I would probably take the Brown side. I do know that the blow up factor, Tyreek Hill, probably has a little more ceiling and probably a little more influencer, but I just really don't trust that Baltimore situation. That's one of the bigger ones looking at high leverage opportunities and just offenses and what they're doing. I mean, I just have a hard time. Dobbins can be as great as he wants. And unless they actually start using him like these other offenses, and they've shown zero proclivity to do so in the Lamar Jackson era, I think it's just going to be tough for him to reach a ceiling that a lot of people think his talent warrants. So I'd probably take a couple of years of Joe Mixon. And I'm pretty down on Joe Mixon. If you've heard me talk about him before, I finally figured it out. Like he has no burst. That's the reason he doesn't break big plays. He can't get through the hole and he can't get to the hole. He can't get past the hole. And so a giant gaping opening. Like they're getting good opportunities in Cincinnati. And Mixon just can't optimize them.
Isn't it really funny to see Mixon be the interior pounder in the offense, and then Samaje Perine being the guy that actually does something in the receiving aspect, considering they were teammates in Oklahoma and didn't do.
What is it? We call it our Madison.
The Alexander Madison. Yeah, the Alexander Madison
effect theory. I actually think Samaje Perine would have a higher PPR ceiling than Mixon. Is that crazy?
Yeah. No, I it's wild because they were coming
nobody,
out.
Nobody chopped that as a show quote. Nobody put that out everywhere. That Samaje Perine has a higher ceiling than Joe Mixon.
Samaje Perine, number 1 injury running back in the league?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. All right. Next one, we got Mike Evans for Mark Ingram and a 23 first from a playoff team.
And it's start 1. I mean, it's Evans.
I think so. Yeah.
It's Evans. Right?
Okay.
I mean, I mean, I heard some national radio talking about how he was the idea of him being a first ballot Hall of Famer is too rich. Someone else had said that, and that's something that we've discussed here. You're going to look down, and he's going to all of a sudden be like top 20, top 15 in touchdowns pretty soon. Like, and it's not that far away. We're talking like a couple of months at the paces that he's going. And in a couple years, he's a little bit behind that in terms of receiving yards, but in a couple years, he could knock off like 20 spots in terms of receiving yards and be up in there in the top 25, 30 and receiving yards as well. Like he's still well in his prime, right? I mean, he's a very durable profile. And again, if you're contending this year and you're giving a real late first, I'm fine doing that for Mike Evans, especially in start one, especially.
He's doing everything right. Like I remember him coming into the NFL. He's trimmed down. He takes care of himself really well.
Brady effect, right?
And I think he avoids generally the big hits. I actually see him measure himself and not, make sure he dives, for no reason. And, he does a lot of things right to say that he's probably going to fare a little better as he goes through because he's not based on, overt acceleration or some of those things that can really erode around 30, 31, 32.
Yeah, he
right.
Probably some of that Brady stuff, like that TB12 and all that stuff that like Gronkowski got into and Brady's gotten into and sort of kept him. Like it seemed like it appears that Evans has sort of gotten into some of that, like with the changes, like you said, changing the body shape. Looks like he's in better.
I know. I wouldn't be surprised if he's playing
shape.
like 6'5", 214, in
right.
season or something like that. When I think he came in at 225, 230 when he was a prospect.
Yeah.
We got Superflex, and you already mentioned your pitch for Geno Smith last week. So this one is going to basically be Geno Smith for a second, but the actual Superflex trade is Geno and a fourth for Tyquan Thornton and a second.
Give me Geno.
There you go. Is he one of your, like I've seen Russell Wilson available for a couple seconds. Stafford might be a similar price. Would you rather go 1 second for Geno or would you rather double up?
I would hand out seconds like it was trick-or-treating candy to get Stafford and Russell Wilson. I mean, I didn't even realize that was a reality. I'm going to have to really go aggressively.
Well, you might be able to get Geno for a third. I mean, that could be possible in the marketplace. So, because Tyquan Thornton, if he's a third, that's kind of like a second and a third. So, anyway, Superflex, we got Dameon Pierce for a first and a second.
Talk about updating priors. How about he's a top 8 running back?
And it's hard to see him not finishing as a running back 1 based on his market share, right?
Yeah. And especially if you take out that first week where he didn't really play, my goodness. And he had that exciting run. Like everything in my being says you take the picks, right? Like, is
this a James Robinson discussion? Like, let's rewind, right? It was 2 years ago. Does that sound about right? And it was, you could get a first or first plus, and the odds, let's go back. I mean, we usually don't resurface on this in season, but I had to go back the what is it, the survival rate or the competition rate? I mean, I think it's less than 50%, right? I'd have to dig up that chart.
Yeah, but it's not great.
It's not great, Bob. You go into that next off season.
Right.
And guess what? Robinson played well and they still slapped Travis Etienne down. So anyway, it's dicey, and this is the first and a second, and it's Superflex. So I would take the picks, even though I have, as you said, updated priors.
Yeah, because I think you could give something less than that for Fournette, right? I think you could do that differently. I think.
Yeah. We got a one quarterback trade, Brian Robinson, who made his debut this past week, for Rashad Penny and a 23 second.
How about it? How about Brian Robinson was like in the midst of taking Antonio Brown's job all summer? He gets shot twice, lands on IR, is out for whatever that was, 4-6 weeks, whatever. A shocking amount of time for getting shot twice on the short end of it. He comes back, and in the first game back, 9 of the 12 running back carries, he triples up Antonio Gibson. Like, it took him not even a game of coming back from 2 gunshot wounds to overtake Antonio Gibson. Like, what was their
week? What were their week 1 plans?
Everything that signals everything we heard all summer was kind of right? That they had questions about him, and that is something. I'm in on Brian Robinson. Especially in one quarterback, like this is you're looking to get a day 2 running back from that range, and like you're already got one that's like appears that he's on the success track? Could you poke holes at him a little bit? Maybe, but if you're going to start doing that, like there's a reason why it wasn't a mid first round rookie pick, right? Because there were holes that you could poke in his profile. So I would take him here because I think you're already ahead of what you would expect from that pick. You have to sort of update. You know that he's not going to flunk out of the league. Like that's a reduction in the risk that you would take over that rookie pick.
Okay. Yeah, I think Penny's very interesting because now after injury, he's going to be a free agent, 27. That's something beyond just an absolute throw-in dart, in my opinion. And that second, like you said, in one quarterback, you're kind of hoping to get Brian Robinson. So, and Robinson could run with things. You just saw like he tripled up Antonio Gibson. My thought was, is Antonio Gibson now a buy? Like, depending on the price, how much is he going to fall? And is he a profile buy? I would really hope that he falls beyond the second round price, personally. And I think there's I don't know if it's considered a good or bad case scenario in this circumstance, but I think there are outs and ways that Washington turns into, Gibson is basically competing with McKissick. And then Robinson is doing a lot of the traditional rushing work, and they're very high and high leverage opportunities. But the problem is right now it's being split three ways. It kind of needs to delineate down to two. But Gibson right now is still going for too much, in my opinion. But I think that third plus for Gibson is probably the angle I'd play in the Washington backfield of just a player I like. I don't know where the road goes, but certainly someone we've seen good production, two-way upside. And if it doesn't work out in Washington, I mean, he's not too long to head to beyond his rookie contract.
Why, if Ron Rivera is going to come out and openly flame Carson Wentz in press conferences, why on earth is he lead the league in dropbacks? Like, I don't understand. Those two things in the same sentence don't make any sense to me. Right? If you don't trust him at all, at the point you're just going to sort of openly take pot shots at him in a press conference about why the other teams in your division are better than you, you just say it's the quarterback. Right? Why are you sort of relying so much on him? I don't understand that as a mental conclusion to jump to with that. So I'm interested to see if maybe the answer to that question is we didn't trust Antonio Gibson more than we trusted him less than we trusted Carson Wentz, and we're actually going to pivot towards Brian Robinson a little bit more, and the offense is going to change. I'm open to that happening, but it's a weird experience in that Washington offense right now.
Oh, yeah. And there's a lot of Scott Turner. What are you doing with play calling and play design? And they have a lot of weapons there. And the fact that they're not better on offense, and frankly, Carson Wentz has made some good plays. So it hasn't been, all flip interceptions of the low light variety, for why they're losing these games. So Washington has been an enigma on offense in terms of why have they not done more? And frankly, their defense stinks too. So there's a lot to unpack there. And I know just because I listen to DC sports talk every week. So,
yeah, I mean they're not to where they need to be in terms of yards per attempt and all that stuff too. Like they're struggling a bit. So, but yeah, I don't understand what their philosophy is given what's coming out of their mouth and what they're doing. It doesn't make a ton of sense.
Finishing out here, we got quotes from the Footballguys Dynasty Forum. As far as Russell Wilson, I'm really coming around to the view that he's cooked. Maybe it's the injury, maybe it's Hackett, but for fantasy purposes, does it really matter? Either way, you're unlikely to get the old Russ back by the end of the season.
By the end of the season, I mean, that's not the bet you're making though, right? Like, if we're investing in Russell Wilson, we're sort of investing in him in Dynasty. Again, I think that this is the low point. One other thing I would point to, by the way, like you talked about the supporting cast. You know who leads the league in dropped passes, right? And the percentage of his attempts that are dropped. It's Russell Wilson, right? Russell Wilson has had the most of his passes dropped. And if you just sort of take that down to his normal thing, I think the numbers look a lot different. And honestly, the numbers aren't that. They're not that far off, right?
They're not bad. They're not horrible. Like, no. I think people pin it like he's doing much better than Stafford. Like it's basically just he's avoiding interceptions. The touchdowns are the career low, easily so. Like he's been double that basically every single season of his career until now. So if you infuse the touchdowns back, we're not having a conversation,
right?
Touchdowns instead of field goals, and yeah, this is easily his lowest. He's been elite. He's been in like that number of the active quarterbacks, like the big guns. He's like quarterback 3 or 4 in my tracking. Like he's right there. Like so don't have one season. This is literally the one season. I think he had 1 year. He was 2016. Like he had a pretty low touchdown rate. It was a blip. He came right back with 5 or 6 in a row, just monsters. So I think they'll fix it. Like I am still optimistic on Denver by December fixing it. Now, is that in time to fix your dynasty team result this year? I don't know, but I think you're going to see better play from Denver, to some level, that we're going to have fewer questions about Russell Wilson by then than now.
So I saw a chart on Twitter, and I was actually going to take a picture of it and send it to you because it was, it's a graph of basically Aaron Rodgers' career, and it's overlaid with Russell Wilson's career. And at the age of 34, both of them see a drop. And we know how it went after that for Aaron Rodgers, right? And that was some of the coaching changes and started going through some scheme changes, and everyone sort of wrote him off. And we spent 2 years making jokes about how people had written him off and were sort of, that he had died off and all these things, right? And then he went on to win multiple MVPs, right? So I think about, you have to be very, very careful when you write off an elite profile, and that's a lesson that I think we should always take with us, right? Whether that's writing off a guy like Saquon Barkley with some struggles, or even when you look at guys like people selling low or selling high on the he's going to be on the wrong side of the age curve on a guy like Travis Kelce. Like all of these guys, right? You write off an elite profile too early at your own peril.
Excellent. Yeah. So we have reporter this morning. How much confidence do you have in Rhamondre Stevenson as a 3-down back? Bill Belichick, as much confidence as you could possibly have. How much? And then this clearly means that Pierre Strong will come in and dominate the carries. Are we done with the Belichickian games? Do you have high confidence in Stevenson with a hamstring injury to Dameon Harris, probably missing multiple weeks?
We'd have to go back. I don't know. Take whatever point you want to go back to in the Patriots running back saga, right? The Shane Vereen Ridley role, right? Even before that, I think at this point, this is the most confident I've ever been in what this backfield will look like, right? In one single game, right? If Dameon Harris is out, I think Rhamondre Stevenson is
slightly more confidence in the Jonas Gray game. Slightly more. Pierre Strong hasn't really played.
No, it has been almost entirely.
Now, if Ty Montgomery were able to be active, which I already read he's not going to be, Ty Montgomery would be that wrench that you throw into the gears.
He's like a 64% snap share rate.
We're going spread. Exactly.
We're going to get rid of the Wildcat.
They're expecting 30 touches out of Rhamondre Stevenson, so we're doing the opposite. Yeah, I mean, he's an auto start. I mean, try to get Stevenson out of your lineup.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
It's going to be real hard this week. It's a good matchup. We're writing it up for the matchup column as well. And I imagine, I haven't looked yet because I don't like to taint myself in advance. But I have to imagine that we are awfully high on Rhamondre Stevenson is running back 6 in terms of his projection of the week so far. So
there you go.
Good luck getting him out of your lineups.
Yeah. And it was so Patriots to just shut out the Lions.
Yeah.
Everyone's talking about how they cannot be stopped on offense. You're like, how about 0? You're not going to sniff anything.
Yeah, Jared Goff had a ton of symptoms of Havana syndrome. I don't know what was happening. It was weird.
There you go. In this episode, we broke down the quarterbacks, kind of a state of a union of where we sit here. A lot of those 2021 guys in year 2. Also, some other young quarterbacks of note in the trading. We talked about Mike Evans bolstering some contenders, Geno Smith, Dameon Pierce, and others. Brian Robinson and that Washington situation as well. I am Chad Parsons. He is Jordan McNamara. And until next time, good luck in your Dynasty